Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We would request you to kindly take your seats. And we would like to kickstart the third day of the Dabur Red Paste Presents Arth, a culture fest. It's a one-of-a-kind multi-regional culture festival, ladies and gentlemen, that we are in progress. 2 fantastic days have already been spent. Today is the third day. We've discussed everything under the sun related to art, literature, culture, history, tradition, music of our country. We believe that this festival is not merely a festival, but a culture quest to keep alive the meaning of our culture indeed. So I'm not going to take much time and quickly get the day rolling for you. But before that, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors who have helped us to create this beautiful event for us. Ladies and gentlemen, our presenting sponsor, Dabur Red Paste, keeps dental problems away. Promoted by Z, supported by Z News, exclusive digital partner Z5, print partner DNA, event partner Incredible India, radio partner Red FM, multiplex partner Inox, food creation partner Kala Swasti, English news channel partner Republic TV, production partner Scoop, campus outreach partner Think India, student partner Dusu, digital outreach partner Your Story, My Nation, shopping partner DLF Shopping Mall, and our outreach partner Spick McKay Blue Lemon Entertainment. We'd like to thank them, and with this, we'd like to start our first discussion for this day. This one is topicked or titled as the Conquest without Coercion, India's Civilizational Outreach. So to do the same, let me first of all invite in a man who has been with us for the last 2 days. He has been moderating many sessions across the 2 days that you have seen him. But I'm going to have him on the stage once again, Mr. Anuraag Saxena, as the moderator for the first session. Ladies and gentlemen, very briefly to once again let you know about him. He's the founder of the India Pride Project, the world's first crowd-funded heritage recovery program. It's a one-of-a-kind effort. We also happened to see the movie yesterday titled as Blood Buddhas, which is definitely a term which is credited to him. Welcome, sir. Please, if you could take your seats. Let me now welcome in our panelists, ladies and gentlemen. To begin with, I would invite Mr. Kiran Vadlamani to please join us on the stage. Give him a round of applause and a welcome onto the stage. He's a venture investor and a social entrepreneur based out of Singapore. He's the founder of Indic Academy, an institution that is seeking to build a renaissance based on Indic civilization. He's passionate about art and culture. He's an active proponent of the India's soft power and strongly believes that India can emerge as a soft superpower by the year 2030. Very warm welcome to you. Let me invite in our next panelist, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Prasenjit Basu. Welcome, sir. He's the author of Asia. You can give him a bigger round of applause, please. Come on, let him feel welcome. He's the author of the Asia Reborn, A Continent Rises from the Ravages of Colonialism and the War to a New Dynamism. He won the Tata Literature Live First Book Award, non-fiction for 2018. He's also, he was the chief economist for Asia and India at Credit Suisse First Boston, to name a few. Let me welcome in our next panelist, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sudhir Devare. Welcome, sir. Let's just give him a round of applause. He was the first Indian ambassador to the newly opened embassies in Ukraine, Armenia, and Georgia. After the disintegration of the Soviet Union, served as Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs from 1998 till his retirement in 2001. It's an honor to have you here, sir. Thank you very much. He's the author of the book India and Southeast Asia Towards Security Convergence, which is, and he's edited a couple of books a new energy frontier, the Bay of Bengal region, to name a few. And finally, let me invite on stage Dr. Shimon to please join us onto the stage as well. He's an artist, curator, and a researcher in Indian studies, focusing on the encounter between the Jewish and the Zionist world and India. He received his PhD at the Hebrew University in 2016, entitled Clear Are the Paths of India. He's now working as a chief curator on exhibition about the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Very warm welcome to you. Thank you very much. So over to this fantastic panel here, ladies and gentlemen, and over to Mr. Saxena. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here. Each of you made the effort which a lot of others didn't. So welcome. Now, I have a bit of a tough task today in terms of moderating a panel, each of whom could have spoken for an hour on this subject deeply. Lord knows Prasenjit could have. But it's very interesting. I was having a conversation about a year back with a friend of mine. And, so he was like, hey, listen, I've discovered yoga. And my life has changed since I've started meditation and discovered yoga. And, so we started having a conversation. His favorite food is butter chicken with naan bread. And he's into golden latte, turmeric and honey latte and all of that. He's gone fairly spiritual and he's hip and cool, right? Lives in California, went with me to B school. So at the end of the conversation, I told him, dude, all you need to do is start talking a little bit louder, and you're Indian from the inside, but you just don't know it yet. So I think India has been fairly successful, not as a matter of design or strategy. India has been fairly successful in spreading its wings and culture outside. There's Bollywood, there's cricket, there's all of that. However, there hasn't been a concerted effort to pull this all together. From a larger civilizational perspective, and which is something I care deeply about. I honestly don't think India is a nation. The nation is a very small part in a very long civilization, or in a very long time scale. A nation is relatively new. But I don't think Indians realize it as much as, let's say, the Chinese do or the Israelis do, sir. So what we're trying to focus on today is how can we as a civilization reclaim our lost glory and go through that arc. We have 4 panelists, plus me, roughly 10 to 12 minutes each. I'd love for the panelists, other than obviously the opening presentation, I'd love for the panelists to stick to a couple of minutes of comments. And I'd like to make it as conversational as possible, right? So feel free to add in points when you see someone else making something you agree with, disagree with. Feel free to interject, add, etc., etc. But to kick this off, could I just request Kiran Vadlamani to make a quick presentation? And if the console could just get Kiran's presentation up, please. Yeah.
Good morning. This is, we have set up a center for soft power, and we are focused on doing exactly what this topic is all about. And there are certain thoughts that I would like to share with you as to what we are doing. Sorry. We have to look at our culture as a natural resource that we have been endowed with. Just like Saudi Arabia is endowed with coal, with oil, Indonesia with coal. India is endowed with a civilization culture, and we have to look at culture as a resource that needs to be leveraged. Soft power, it's not clear, but soft power has been defined as culture, political values, and foreign policy. And India is very high. They've just changed the background and the colors, so they've changed the presentation. But that's where India is, in the third row. We have to understand what the global trends are. The global trends are clearly what I call as the 4C framework. Cultural experiences, So nobody comes to Delhi to just visit a monument, but they would want a cultural experience. So tourism is all about experiences. Again, craft is a very big trend worldwide. People are looking at conscious consumption, and craft is a big trend across the world. Similarly, care, healthcare, Ayurveda, and consciousness, which is basically the spiritual aspects of a culture, and environment. More importantly, the fastest growing religion today is spiritual but not religious. That's the new and fastest growing religion. India scores high on all the global trends, whether it's cultural experiences, craft, or consciousness or care. We are very high on all the. What we need to look at when we're looking at leveraging our civilizational culture is that we have to look at it from an economic perspective. We need to devise policies to harness culture as a resource that India is endowed with, focus on the economic value chain behind the cultural experiences, and devise strategies and policies accordingly. The kind of strategies that we are following at the Center for Soft Power is, first, we have established the Center for Soft Power. We're now looking at establishing a trade body called NICE, a network of Indian cultural enterprises. We're creating a global dashboard of how our culture is being consumed. We're looking at establishing a soft power fund, and also making initiatives like taking Mudra global, and thinking of cluster theory. You heard of Michael Porter and how he's come up with cluster theory, and looking at clusters as a way of leveraging our soft power. So what we have done is we have done India's first conference on soft power last December, where more than 60 speakers from around the world have come, and we had 15 sessions. We break up soft power across different verticals. We look at spirituality, Ayurveda, cuisine, Bollywood, language, literature, craft, design. So all these verticals, and each of these verticals we are looking, driving deep down and seeing what's the effect across the world. We've recently did a conference in Singapore, India through its thoughts and senses. Now we're looking at Australia, and then next in San Francisco. So we're doing country-wise and discovering a lot of Indophiles who are looking at consuming our culture, collecting our culture. So this is a NASCOM of culture, so to speak. We are setting up NICE. The idea is just like a FICCI, ASSOCHAM, or NASCOM, this trade body would have members from all over the world, and it covers all verticals. It will look at policy advocacy and look at events. And we are trying to create a business plan that will create a framework or a plan for India to become a soft power by 2030. You have seen what this government has done with the dashboard in terms of the Prime Minister's office, the kind of effort that they've done. So what the dashboard that we are trying to do is for every vertical that we have, we're creating a dashboard. For example, in Sydney, you will be able to know in locality-wise what kind of restaurants are there, Indian restaurants are there, how many yoga studios in each locality are there, how many teachers are there. So that way you will have exactly a framework to see how a culture is being consumed. And then you can see the trends and then try to make policy interventions to make additional interventions. Again, most of the cultural enterprises are very small scale enterprises. So the idea is to look at equity infusion into these ventures so that they can scale up and export. They'll focus on companies that deliver a product, service, or an experience. They could be companies based in India or around the world. You all know about the initiative that Mudra has taken to fund startups in India. This is the policy intervention that we want to do with the government to see that Mudra can also do financing for startups outside of India. Somebody wants to set up a food truck outside Wall Street, or somebody wants to set up a restaurant, whatever the business that he wants, we should be able to finance this. We had the Statue of Unity. We are looking at creating a policy framework for building a city of unity, wherein artisans from all villages around India can all, few families can come and migrate and, to a maybe south of Goa or on the eastern side. And there we get the economies of scale, so that any person who wants to buy any handicrafts can come to one location and buy. We also have economies of scale in design. We have economies of scale in manufacturing, storing. A lot of economies scale will come in. One of the examples is Bali. Bali is a unique place that's been created where the artists, artisans, and designers live in fantastic fusion. And that's the kind of a place that we should be creating, a city of unity, where there is contemporization of handicrafts, new technology, and that's how there'll be growth. We have to recognize that within the slivers that there are certain clusters, whether it's Indian nurses, Indian teachers, construction workers, software engineers, professors, entrepreneurs, executives. If you notice that each of these, we excel wherever in the world, people recognize and want to hire. Okay, I would like to, like if you go to a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, if an Indian entrepreneur is setting up a startup, the chances of his funding would be greater. 50% of Indian startups, the market share Indians have. So there is a certain reason for that. We have to examine that and promote that. The other thing that's a big trend that we foresee is that thanks to universal basic income and artificial intelligence, India's spiritual power would be more needed. As it is, the globe consumes Indian spiritual power. It would be even more needed, and we need to know how to produce more spiritual gurus.
Kiran, just a time check.
To conclude,
if you can, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, this
to
was
conclude,
destiny.
To become a Vishwa Guru is in our destiny, and I think we should just prepare a strategy and a roadmap and work towards it. Thank you.
Oh, this is wonderful. Can we have a round of applause for Kiran Vadlamani, please? So this is, I think, a great way to set the context and the framework for what we should be doing as a civilization. Huge vision, as it is task. The large part of our challenge would be moving this from paper to action. And I think that's where we'll try and achieve, both in terms of historical learnings, experiential learnings, and comparative learnings. Can I invite Prasenjit Basu, whichever way. Can I invite Prasenjit, as I call him, yes, to quickly start with India's influence in the past and the footprint we've left, especially in Southeast Asia. And that can be a good, unless you know where you're coming from, there's no way to know where you're going. So Prasenjit.
Yeah, so historically, India has had an enormous influence on the world. Of course, in today's world, we have yoga and Bollywood and Indian cuisine as perhaps the most successful, three most successful exports of Indian culture to the world. But for most of recorded history, India has been the world's largest economy. In the year of Christ's birth, India accounted for 32.9% of world GDP. In 1700 AD or CE, India accounted for 24.4% of world GDP and still was the world's largest economy. And these numbers are not mine. They are from Angus Maddison, who is a relatively well-regarded historian of the world, and economic historian in particular. So given that we were the world's largest economy, it was quite natural that our influence would be pervasive around the world. And in particular, about 15 to 1800 years ago, when Sanskrit was on the wane in India itself and was being replaced by the Prakrits and the regional variants, Sanskrit became the basis of the unifier of Southeast Asia. So what is today Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia, Vietnam, all came under the influence of a Sanskrit-based culture, and much of that remained. So if you look at the coronation of the king of Thailand, in May this year, the new king will be crowned. And when he is crowned, he needs to have Ganga Jal from Benares to consecrate the new king. And of course, the new king will also be called Ram. He's King Ram the 10th. All the kings of the current dynasty in Thailand are called Ram. He's the 10th in the line. It's the Chakri dynasty, but it is the dynastic name is Ram. And his sister is a tremendous scholar of Sanskrit. She was called the crown princess, his second sister. So that is one example. And if you go to places like Cambodia.
Just interject for 10 seconds and I will let you continue, just to extend that example. In a conversation with the Thai foreign minister, he actually asked me, hey, listen, my name is Veera. First name is Veera. He says, look, I have a Sanskrit name. How come you guys have stopped using Sanskrit names? So it's kind of fascinating how much we have forgotten and countries like Thailand and Cambodia have picked up. But
absolutely, please. Thailand, everybody has a Sanskrit-based name. All names are Sanskrit-based. Only you can't tell because the Thai language is spoken in tones. There are about 5 tones. So someone might be called Abhisit, but he's actually Abhijit. Anyway, and so on. I mean, there are lots and lots of these variations. Now, moving on, if you look at, say, Cambodia, the kings of Cambodia are called Norodom. Norodom actually means Narottam. When you go eastwards from Delhi towards Bengal, it will become Narottam. And when you go further east, it becomes Norodom. So there you have it. Norodom, Sihanouk, Norodom, Ranarid, Ronorom, so on. So they are, and the influence, if you go to the royal palace in Phnom Penh, it is completely filled with murals of the Ramayana, which they call Ramakien. It's Ramakarti in Cambodia, Ramakien in Thailand.
Prasenjit.
Similarly, can we
just get an opening comments because we need to close at some point. So if we could just hold on this conversation till we get everyone's opening comments, unless you need another 30 seconds to wind up.
So I just began with some of the.
But we also need to end.
For instance, the national epic. Just one last thing: the national epic of Indonesia is called Arjuna Vivaha. It is, as you can see, Arjuna Vivaha. It's not about Arjun. It is actually about the great unifier of Indonesia called Airlangga, who was a Balinese prince who married into the Majapahit kingdom of Sumatra and Java. And the epic named after his life is called Arjuna Vivaha. I mean, the marriage of this Balinese prince to the Javanese is celebrated in the national epic. And of course, the puppet theater of Indonesia is celebrated. It's there in everyday life.
Wonderful.
And it is completely based on the Mahabharata and Ramayana. So, and of course, when you land in Bali's airport, you are immediately, as soon as you come out of the airport, the first thing you see is.
So let me recommend something, guys. As we've seen from yesterday, Prasenjit won't stop unless stopped thrice. But let me plug in.
This is a bit unfair, I think. Anyway.
Let me plug in something very interesting. Now, I've had the opportunity to sit at length with Prasenjit and discuss the depth with which he understands India's impact, especially eastwards. Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, North Korea, South Korea, etc. I would honestly urge you guys to take out some time, buy his book. It is a fabulous book. I don't think anyone has researched either India or Asia in the context of India with the depth he has, right? a retelling of Subhash Chandra Bose, a retelling of, the naval mutiny, of Jawaharlal Nehru, and way much more. Very strong recommendation with the disclaimer, he's a friend, but that's not why I'm recommending it. But sorry? I would love to, ma'am. I also want to be respectful to other people on the panel. As a moderator, it is my job to ensure everybody gets a fair turn. What I would honestly urge you is to take this conversation offline. The ambassador and Shimon have not opened and half our time is done. As much as I would love to continue and focus, please understand I have a tough job here to run. Ambassador. Sure, please. You have, there's a mic there. So Ambassador, you have had the honor and we've had the privilege of you representing India in a lot of these diplomatic conversations. And as the topic suggests, in the Southeast. We'd love to hear from you of how receptive, especially in the context of Singapore, where you've spent a lot of time, and in the context of South Korea, where you've spent a lot of time. What does it mean for India to structurally and officially put its foot forward? What kind of challenges you faced, what kind of pushback you faced, etc., if you may.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me this morning to this Arth Cultural Fest. Well, the topic is indeed very fascinating. As we understand, culture, I think, is a collective of consciousness. And as one culture interfaces with another culture, you see a process of absorption, assimilation, give and take. And I think this process goes on and on. It is a continuously evolving process. And that has exactly happened with Indian culture, which you can really trace back to thousands of years. The reference which Mr. Basu just made to India's culture in Southeast Asia and Far East is a fascinating saga. And I think it will require not one session, but several days or months to discuss this very big subject. But suffice to say that Indian culture has had this has been a kind of a source of Indian investment abroad. Again, going back to hundreds and thousands of years. And India has created so many assets everywhere, which are even today being used in geopolitical, geoeconomic terms, in expanding India's influence in every respect. And I would like to only say, in terms of a few anecdotes, how India's diplomatic effort today is fully supported by the strong foundation that India has in terms of culture. I'll restrict mainly to Southeast Asia and Far East, but the Indian culture, as I pointed out, has had its imprint, not just there, but all around the world. Well, the oldest one has been the influence of Indian religions, including Buddhism and Hinduism. And even today, whenever you go walk on the streets of South Korea, you will be immediately greeted with a namaskar. And you are quite surprised. At least that used to happen when I was posted in Korea in the mid-80s and the early 90s. And they would say that you come from the land of Sakya Muni, so we really respect you. There is a legend of Princess of Ayodhya. Now, whether it is that Ayodhya from India or Ayodhya from Thailand, it is not very clear. But most likely Ayodhya from India, because the legend is 2,000 years old. And it talks of the Princess of Ayodhya, which went from India to South Korea. She was sent by her father in a ship. And there she goes and meets the Korean prince called Suro. She marries him, and that becomes a family which has been a great influence on the politics of South Korea since then. These are known as the Kims of Kim Hae, a small town called Kim Hae. So they are known Kim Hae Kims. And some of the Kim Hae Kims have been the most influential Kims in Korea even now. Kim Dae-jung, if you must have heard name, or Kim Jong-pil, or I think the wife of last president was also one of that family. And interestingly, in my time, there was a Korean prime minister who was a Kim, his name was Kim Jong-pil. And he would often tell me, Ambassador, we are very proud that we had an Indian grandmother. And therefore, Kims have always very pure blood. We have no deformities. He came to India for the inauguration. He was here visiting, and there was an inauguration of our trade fair at Pragati Maidan. And the then Indian Vice President, Mr. Kishan Kanji, he was with this Korean Prime Minister or Korean Vice President then. And Kim Jong-pil says to him, or to the audience, gentlemen, in the audience, gentlemen, don't you see a great resemblance between Mr. Kishan Kant and myself? Because we come from the same family. So that kind of, these are very intangibles, you cannot measure. But even tangibles, the chairman, the original chairman of Hyundai, called Chung Ju-young, he was a great, supporter of the message of Tagore. And in fact, he lent his space in South Korea, in Seoul, for the Tagore Society. Rabindranath Tagore is a household name in Korea. And in fact, his short poem, which Tagore gave to the Korean students when they came to Korea in the 1920s, it reads something like this. In the golden age of Asia, Korea was the torchbearer, and that lamp remains to be lighted for the illumination of the East. Now this brief poem says a lot, and the Koreans always regard this as a kind of a poem for their self-esteem. It is still the logo on one of the Korea's leading newspaper called Chosun Ilbo. And when President Bush, the senior President Bush of the US, visited Korea, in the National Assembly, he quoted Rabindranath Tagore's poem. Mahatma Gandhi's universal values, his message of non-violence and civil disobedience, have been held with highest esteem in many countries, including South Korea. And I recall the Korean Gandhi, his name was Hamsu Khan, addressing thousands of Koreans on Gandhi Jayanti, and they used to celebrate Gandhi Jayanti that time, with Korean students, and that was still, Korea had not become democracy. Thousands of students weeping and crying when they heard this message of Mahatma Gandhi. So these have left such deep imprint on countries as far as South Korea, and again, they are being leveraged constantly. You cannot really measure in terms of how many agreements have been signed and how many investments have been made, but their value is remarkable. I will tell you briefly about Indonesia, a country which enjoys syncretic or synthetic culture, something which you may not be immediately aware of. But Indonesia has some of Hinduism's and Buddhism's most magnificent wonders like Borobudur and Prambanan. In the main square of Jakarta, you will be surprised, there is the statue of Arjuna and Krishna. This is a chariot in which Sri Krishna is riding the chariot and Arjuna standing there. And Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world. As he mentioned, Mr. Basu mentioned, there are hundreds of words in Indonesian language, just as in Thai language, which are purely Sanskrit words. And most of these words we don't use in India, but they use in Indonesia. In the embassy, Indonesian embassy in Washington, D.C., in front of the embassy, there is a big statue of Saraswati with Veena. I think all that, and I remember the impact of Bollywood, Indonesia's former president, Madam Megawati, who was the daughter of President Sukarno, and the name Megawati itself was given by, by Mr. Biju Patnaik. She used to come to our house in Jakarta to celebrate Diwali and will spend hours there with the children. And she would come to the embassy to watch Bollywood films. And one day, somehow we didn't inform her that there was a film show. She was very angry that we did not let her know about it. So this is a kind of relationship India has been able to establish over the years. Much more needs to be done. I think if India has to emerge as a kind of a, leader in this regard, and again, not in the form of giving something, but rather sharing with others. Because culture is such a concept or a commodity about which every community is proud of. And I think if India has the excellence in any field, then our culture will be respected. Southeast Asians respected us because India had something to give which was really of the highest standard. So whether it is yoga, whether it is our Ayurvedic medicine, whether it is India's software, we must excel. And only then, I think Indian culture and Indian values will have that durability and respect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for very memorable anecdotes, comparisons, and also for ending at the note which would naturally segue into what I'd like Shimon to talk about. You ended with saying there's much more to be done. And a great example of that is India's influence with the Israeli people, with the Jews, and Israel's influence on the rest of the world, and what enables that. We were having a chat yesterday around how, people have yoga mats under their arms early in the morning, and you can see them all around town in Tel Aviv. So, and let me apologize on behalf of Shimon. Our city's pollution and weather has not been treating him too nicely. He has a terrible throat. So, as much as you can speak, Shimon.
So thank you very much. Sorry about my voice. You might remember this venue because of my voice. I would say very shortly, the first comment that India and Israel were both ancient nations on a process of national revival. And both of them under the British. So the discourse about India in Israel as Asian country coming back to Asia was very strong. This was my last research, which was published as a book. This is one thing. The second thing is that in Israel, the view about India was always kind of Orientalist thing. In a way that there is always wisdom in India. This is something that's very clear and is going since the Greek time. On the other side, India was never so much going out, trying to reach out, and this is something that has to be changed. Historically, ancient time. We spoke about what Israel is doing, and I want to add 2 comments about also what I think should be done in India. One thing in Israel that, as I said, maybe in life, disadvantages can turn to advantages. When you have to solve problem, you find the solutions. When you are in need, you are in pressure, and I think India has also their own problem, which can be a part of this solution. I was thinking, what are the reasons for that? What made it the solution? So one thing in Israel which has to be very clarified, everyone has to go to the army. Men are going for 3 years, women are going for 2 years. They're going when they're 18, after finishing high school. That means they don't go to study university, but the impact of that, and not about everyone, the army is a big organization, but if you go to a good place, so when you are 18, when you are 19, you have such a responsibility that you won't get anywhere else in the civil life. You can be a pilot, you can be an elite commander unit, you have experience in management, solving problem, human relationship with your people, you have to solve problem of budget, and so on. It's like complete field. So this is one which makes and you get a lot of experience as a 19-year-old boy or girl. You know, that's a woman. And this has a lot of impact about after that. Of course, nobody wants to go to the army, but once you have to do it, it has a lot of advantages. The second thing, as I said, Israel became kind of a center for Sanskrit. You don't like it, but there is a decline of Sanskrit studies all over the world. There are less and less students that studying Sanskrit. I don't know if it can be solved or not, but somehow, for various reasons, and one of the reasons, what we describe the two paradise languages. What are the two paradise languages? It's Hebrew, or maybe it's Sanskrit and Hebrew. The competition between Hebrew and Sanskrit as the languages, the original languages of the world, it's a very interesting connection. This is one thing. There is a lot of research was done about it. And one of the reasons that Israel has such a center for Professor Schulman, which was the father of Sanskrit studies in Israel, because also the yoga is the main export of India today as cultural. It used to be meditation, but now it's yoga. Of course, it's going through Western filters. You can argue it if it's still close to the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali. This is academic discourse or discussion. But yoga is the main export. In Tel Aviv, it's the highest rate. Like the people who practice yoga, it's the highest rate in the world. Even Modi mentioned it. yeah. And one thing, and two very short comments. One thing, I'm participating in a lot of international conferences, and always there is a problem that Indian studies, there are very little Indian researchers coming for Indian studies. And even the Indian studies are controlled by the Buddhist studies. This is a big problem. Like when you have 3 people speaking about India Hinduism, and then you have 6 people adding the Hinduism which speaks about Buddhism. This is a big problem in Indian studies. The last point I want to emphasize, and this, it's a personal one, it's very difficult to work in archive in India. It's almost impossible for a foreign researcher. It's almost impossible. This something has to be opened up.
Wonderful. Oh, this was so fascinating, and thank you, because, very often there is no way to evaluate yourself unless you see a parallel. And Israel for us and China, which Prasenjit deals or studies heavily, are wonderful examples for us to figure out what we have as a strength and what we have as a weakness. Now, is Vikram in the audience? So I need to tell you guys a quick story because we have time only for ending comments. So I was having a conversation with Vikram around, dude, why would you want me to moderate this particular panel? I'm a heritage guy, I'm a negotiation guy, and what have you. And he says, look here, Anuraag, I read the Washington Post article on you. And the article describes India Pride Project or you or whatever as 2 things. So A, the article had said that IPP is representative of the re-emergence of Indians taking pride in their own civilization. And B, while a lot of people talk about outreach and soft power and all of that, Washington Post said that this is an article this is a project that has actually delivered on soft power. Now, we have a very short time. I'm going to talk about the idea of delivery or implementation or tangibles or what can be done. I'd like each of the panelists to come up with one thought. If you had to super prioritize and deliver on one thing which would help leverage India into the next trajectory in terms of increasing our civilizational footprint outside India, what would that one maha change be? And let me start with Kiran ji. If you had to prioritize between all the 10 things that you're doing, or pick an 11th. What should we as a nation do first and focus on? Achievable targets.
I think the problem is in identity. So we have not connected back to our identity. So we have to fix that. Once we fix that, then the rest will follow. The globe is consuming our culture. All the millennials are consuming our culture, but they don't recognize it as our culture. Mm-hmm. So we have to fix the problem of identity, which comes only from education. So it goes back to Sanskritization or whatever you call it, starting from there. And that is something which is not in our control, which is a more a government thing.
Can I again plug in another friend? I'd love for you to look up Indic Academy, Indic Pictures, Indic, there's a whole range of verticals which are creating content both in long form articles as well as short videos. Please share them, show them to your children, to your spouses, to your friends, discuss them. Education, we can't change CBSE and the Ministry of Culture. What we can do is look up Hari Kiran ji's organization's work and make sure that we get a perspective on India. We pull or seek for it. We are seekers at the end of the day. And thank you so much for creating all that content. I just want all of us to ensure, do yourself a favor, go to Indica, what's the website? Indica Pictures.
IndicAcademy.com, .org, and then you have all these things.
And look at one video and you will be convinced to watch one every day. Prasenjit, the one Maha idea.
I think the main idea for me is we need to first fix ourselves and understand the depth of Indian culture, teach our children about what has made India great through 5,000 years. And that to some degree, to a large degree, is lost in our current education system. Even if you look at the word Zen, in Japan, Zen Buddhism is a thing. But the word Zen comes from Dhyan. So Dhyan became Chan when it reached China. It became Zen when it reached Japan. We've lost our connection to Dhyan ourselves. So the fact that we ourselves don't teach our children, and I include myself, I didn't have a single day of Sanskrit education through my 16 years in the education system in India. So Sanskrit, for instance, is the central link that ties us to the whole of the East, and clearly also to Israel. What Israel has achieved with Hebrew, India should have achieved with Sanskrit. We have entirely neglected the national link language, the language that links all of India, all of India's linguistic groups together is Sanskrit, including Tamil, by the way. The Sangam literature of the great Sangam literature in Tamil is all heavily Sanskrit influenced. So that link has been lost, and I think in reviving it, among other things, there was a Turkish Prime Minister, President Bülent Ecevit, who was a Sanskrit scholar, and when he went to war, again, when he declared war on Cyprus in 1974, he quoted the Bhagavad Gita to his generals. Of course, in Turkish, because he had translated the Bhagavad Gita into Turkish. So, and of course, at the moment when the first nuclear test was done by the Americans, the creator of the first nuclear bomb, Oppenheimer, also quoted the Bhagavad Gita. How many of us have even read the Bhagavad Gita? So, this is the tragedy of modern India, that we are not imbued with our own culture. How are we going to then use that culture as a basis of soft power around the world?
Wonderful. Ambassador? The one, and we have a minute each.
I think in the interdependent world, India as a confident nation, confident people, must have greater outreach to the people of the world. We seem to be drawing inside internally much more than we should be opening ourselves to the outside world. And that has to be from not just from diplomats or from the Ministry of External Affairs, but it has to be at all levels, be it our media, be it our scientists, be it our students, be it the practitioners of yoga and other cultural attributes. So I think that kind of thing has to be undertaken by our media, by our political leaders, by our educational institutions. Unless we look to the outside world much more, then we will be perhaps, I think, drowning ourselves into our own internal problems.
That's a wonderful thought, sir. Introspection is perhaps the most ignored and the most needed at the same time. Shimon, exactly 58 seconds for you.
I think I said it. I think there is, in academic world, and this I want to emphasize again, I mean, of course, Buddhism is part of India, but the fact that Hinduism is less, you can see it less in the general international conference. The relationship between Buddhism and Hinduism, it's not equal. I mean, in the way India is, I mean, so this something has to be changed. And as I said, again, I'm saying it again, it's very difficult to work in India for an archives, and this is something India has to open it up, its archives. I mean, I was working in Shanti Niketan. They gave me 5 digital files. This was after 1 hour discussion with the director. The rest I had to take notes, which I was not able to finish. And was the only one in the world who was interested in this subject. It was published as a book here in India. So this cannot work like this.
Wow. Now, it says time's up, so question to the lady. Do we have time for a couple of questions? 1 or 2 questions? So why don't we do this? Let's take a couple of questions. If you could state your name, who your question is directed to, and a very short question, please, and then we'll answer the questions together. Yes, sir, the gentleman in the white kurta.
It's quite a treat to hear you, great scholars, and you've spoken so forcefully. What I'm looking at is that, there is scholarship, there are great leaders like you, and there is great venue, and there is institutional support, but where is the audience? And this is not just only about this particular event. All over the place, whenever you have a scholarly conference on Indic topics or such civilizational this thing, there are scholars, and the audience is once again actually just, the other scholars who are listening to each other all the time. Where is the audience? The audience is always missing in action. So there is something about, it's not about the content and saying that how great India has been in the civilization. There is a complete disconnect, and the missing thing is, as they say, the medium is the message. There is something seriously missing where we are as scholars and other people who are the lover of the tradition to connect with the heart of the audience, where people should be flocking the place. There should have been 100,000 people, 10,000 people over here. Where are they? So it is not necessarily I'm putting the question, it is all our responsibility to figure out how can we really connect with Bollywood. The content is absent, but somehow they're able to connect, for example. I'm just taking a counterpoint, actually, just as well. So there is deep scholarship, there is endless content in Indian civilization and culture. We have to focus on grabbing the audience. Thank you.
I thank you so much for the comments, sir. It's a challenge we face everywhere. I'm taking the liberty on answering on behalf of everyone. But I have personally spoken about the idea, the concept that implementation is far stronger than the idea. So there's a bit of a change we as panelists or content creators need to make. We'll get there with time. I don't know if you were here for the film release yesterday. We have to explore new mediums to reach out and democratize to people. But yes, I do see your pain. This is not uncommon. The good part is whenever you're ahead of the curve, it takes time for the middle of the curve to catch on. But I couldn't agree more with you. I feel your pain. It is a lonely journey. And, we're all part of this. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Good morning.
Ladies first, please.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Bhashwati Bhattacharya. I'm looking at the question that he has posed before me and how we can get to the audience. And I'd like to hear your comments about where we can take those people that are not here. What I've been doing is working with the thing that everyone in this, on this planet deals with, which is health. Health is wealth, we say. So I've been looking at Ayurveda. I'm a modern medical doctor, but I've been working with Ayurveda for the last 20 years. And my question to all of you is, instead of just saying, oh yes, there's Ayurveda and yoga, and we have the International Day of Yoga for one day a year, what would you say about taking your own health and giving it to experts of Ayurveda? That said, in my own research, I just completed a PhD in Ayurveda. What I find is that the people that are seriously doing Ayurveda very well don't want to share it with the Western world. And can you comment on those scholars who are saying things in ignorance because they are not studying with the people that actually know Ayurveda, versus those who actually know Ayurveda and don't have a way to share with the world? How do we bridge that divide? Because I do believe that there's a lot of knowledge in Ayurveda that actually, I mean, I'm curing people with Ayurveda that I can't do in modern medicine, but there's this divide that we can't seem to bridge. Thank you.
Can we just get the other questions, please? Yes.
Actually, first question to the Shimon, actually in Israel, how do you understand the Buddhism, relationship between the Buddhism and the Hinduism? And the second question to the Prasenjit sir, sir, you talk about the soft power, that all thing, Joseph and I very tremendously elaborated the concept of soft power. But if you look into the Southeast Asia, where we finding since the traditional time, we are very influencing. But after 1991, when the India become very globalized, after the opening the economy and that all thing, now we having the great vision So in contemporary time, if we want to conquest the world with the culture, with soft power, so how we should have a strategy for the future? So we will be like Vishwaguru in the future coming days.
So I'm assuming that question was for Kiran, Vadlamani, or for Prasenjit? Anyone, okay. Yes, sir. Last question.
One word about Buddhism. We have just been through 10 years of a government which wouldn't leave any stone unturned to put down Hinduism in any of its aspects. So that explains why, even when you're discussing Hinduism, it's actually Buddhism. And one word about the audience. अभी दिल्ली में बैठ करके आप इतनी अच्छी अंग्रेजी बोलेंगे हम सब लोग. If we are sitting in Delhi and we are talking in English and you expect audience to throng in here, that is funny. See, that's straight funny. Now, this is a very complex thing, and we have been struggling with it, but I'm sure we'll prevail. Some kind of a mixture will come around to in the next 5 or 10 years, and then you'll have the audience. Otherwise, we can keep discussing Ayurveda in chaste English or French, and then keep crying that there's no audience. Thank you.
Very valid point, sir.
I just want to comment about the audience, as we said. First, it's a global crisis for humanities. I mean, there's nothing connected everywhere. There is various reasons for that, and many scholars now going for more popular publications and not only academic. This is everywhere in the world, so don't worry about it. And not always the number of the audience is important. Publication, things that can be, even there will be 200 audience or what. I mean, I don't see that's bad. I don't think that's always what matters. Regarding your questions, as I said, Vivekananda was the first one, let's say, that was looking on Hinduism as a global religion, as a world religion. But after that, it changed to more, especially after the Tibetans, Tibetan Buddhism and Thailand, and this came from the States. And somehow, and I agree with you, and I agree also with what you say, that when we speak about India, when we speak about Hinduism, many times we speak about Buddhism. It has various reasons. One of them, the psychological aspect of Buddhism, which is much easier for the Western world. But this is something that has to change, and there are very great scholars about Hinduism.
Wonderful.
If
Now,
I could
going
just say something on this point about Hinduism and Buddhism, the schism, the so-called schism, is a colonial construct. We basically have a Sanatan Dharma, and there are various versions of it. You could say that Shakta is one, Shaivism, Vaishnavism, Buddhism. If you go to, say, Thailand, the practice of so-called Buddhism includes worship of Vishnu, Shiv, Ram, Sita, Lakshman, Brahma. You know, the shrine that was bombed in Bangkok, in the center of Bangkok, about 4 or 5 years ago, by ISIS terrorists from Uzbekistan, was a Brahma shrine. It's right in the middle of Bangkok, near the Hyatt Erawan Hotel. It's called the Erawan Shrine. It is a Brahma shrine, and every Thai person who passes that shrine stops to pray there. So there really is this so-called schism is an artificial schism. There is no schism between Hinduism and Buddhism. They are part of a continuum, and I think the correct term is the term that Sri Aurobindo used, Sanatan Dharma. And you know, similarly with Sikhism and so on, they're all part of the Sanatan Dharma, Jainism as well.
Wonderful. So I've been starting to I've started to get stares. 2 quick questions. One for Hari Kiran ji, the question on Ayurveda, and I'm going to extend that question a little bit. Why just Ayurveda? There are multiple disciplines where Indian content creators, researchers, etc., should be reaching out to the rest of the world and engaging with them the other way around too. So how do you effectuate the process of outreach and engagement? And through your Indic Academy network, that's something you've been involved with. So you could take it specifically in the context of Ayurveda or expand it beyond. I leave that to you. And with that, and the quick question for Ambassador, and then...
We also have Dabur and Himalaya doing a little bit of
course,
Ayurveda-based medicine. Anyway.
Thank you. Yeah, what she has pointed is very valid, that we don't treat Ayurveda as a treatment as a treatment. We only look at products, what you have just mentioned, the companies that make the products. Unlike traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, we don't use Ayurveda unless we live that and believe in the treatment as a treatment of disease. It's going to take some change. It's going to take a lot of time. And insofar as sharing is concerned, like you know, Aish came into being only 91. Ceylon, Sri Lanka had a ministry for Ayurveda much before. We had Aish in 91, and then the ministry came over. So we don't live that, and you very rightly point that out. Insofar as sharing is concerned, I think there is also a system of distrust in terms of a lot of companies that have come and appropriated, not recognized, patented or tried to patent. So there's a distrust. The West complains that China is indulging in intellectual theft, property theft. But actually there's a lot of blame at their doorstep too. So therefore, take some time. Again, it comes back to we ourselves have to live it. We are not living that yet. So government is making some efforts. People like you who are trying to bridge both the places are making an effort. It'll take some more time for that. But the point is the world is consumed. World wants or is interested in it. That's the point that you're making. But we are not ready, or we are not able to reach out. And then, of course, you have all the regulatory issues, FDA issues. What China has been able to mainstream TCM, we have not been able to do that. And
Can we take this offline, ma'am, if you don't mind? Because now, just to be fair, last question to Ambassador Devare, and a tangential question that I've had. Had I been in the audience, I would have asked you this. It's been more than a century since India had the biggest, the person who symbolized civilizational outreach, Swami Vivekananda. Now, what will it take for us to have another Swami Vivekananda And when do you think that's likely to happen?
I think, fortunately, it is happening all the time in the form of Swami Vivekananda, I think. We have now hundreds and thousands of Indian messengers of universal peace and brotherhood going around the world. I would say Indian software engineers who work in the Silicon Valley are perhaps doing similar function. And a yoga teacher may be doing that. Or an Indian doctor, or our workers in Africa or Southeast Asia. I think the language may have changed, but the content of Swami Vivekananda's message is always valid and relevant, and this is being spread. I think we can continue to do so, and for which I think a concerted campaign and investment needs to be done. I think this is how we should spread our message, because India has not had ever any history of conquest outside. India has always tried to share its knowledge, spiritual or rational or whatever. And India has never been that way patronizing, because once upon a time India clothed the world. Very few people know about it. But I think India did it in the same way as we have been doing from the past. So I think this is something which India continues to do so, and that is probably going to be the best tribute or homage to Swami Vivekananda.
Wonderful. And as I say this all the time, India is perhaps the only civilization or culture to have conquered the world without ever getting aggressive with it. Anyone else, you look at the Ottoman Empire, you look at the Mughals, you look at anybody else, they have had to engage in bloodshed, destruction and aggressiveness to ensure that culture moves from point A to point B. India never has done that. And I think that's at the core of what India has to offer to the rest of the world. I thank the panel. I apologize for being curt and cutting off people. This topic is so deep, we could have gone on for days and days and days. I urge you all to continue to stay on. Another personal story. I was trying to convince my lovely wife to come here with me, leave the kids alone. And I showed her a picture of the rasgullas and gulab jamuns that would be sold here. And then she says, that's not enough. So I said, boss, Anuj Dhar aane wala hai. And she says, kaun Anuj Dhar? Wo boss wala? I said, haan, wohi wala. And she said, ki, theek hai, then I'm coming. So I urge you all to stay seated. The next session is going to be fascinating. And thank you, Kiran ji, thank you, Prasenjit ji, Ambassador Devare and Shimon Lev. And thank you to the audience as well.
Thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you.